Go ahead, Avni.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to KRVIA Encounters. In 1961, TWA opened the doors of its brand new iconic terminal at JFK, designed by the world renowned architect Eero Saarinen. In its first 50 years of existence, this terminal saw the heydays of the jet aviation industry as well as the troubled times. This iconic structure, an example of modern architecture, introduced some of the groundbreaking ideas of celebrating the luxury of flight and the superior passenger experience that architects try to follow even today in latest terminal design. Unfortunately, due to rapid changes in the commercial aviation industry, this terminal fell short in keeping up with the needs of its end users and fell in disrepair for 3 decades, finally shutting down its doors in 1999. After almost 15 years of closure, the TWA terminal was reopened once again to wow the world travelers arriving at JFK Airport in its new adaptive use. Kiran Merchant started his aviation career in this building as a summer intern and grew to be the head of design for TWA and played an important part in saving this historic marvel from being further destroyed. Later, Kiran led the adaptive reuse study, which resulted in its new life in the 21st century. Kiran Merchant is an architect and urban designer and the founder of Merchant Aviation, a full service aviation planning and design firm working globally on large scale airport infrastructure projects. During his tenure as the chief of aviation planning division at the Port Authority of New York, Kiran led the vision planning effort at JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark international airports. He has worked at more than 50 airports around the world during his tenure at TWA and Continental Airlines. Kiran's work in Airport Terminal of the Future has been recognized globally. Welcome, Kiran, to KRVI Encounters, and you may now take the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Actually, good evening for you guys. It's about 7:45 in the morning over here. I'm in New York. I originally had told Mamta that actually I would be there in person. And I always like to basically kind of ask questions and be able to kind of talk to people. Unfortunately, Putin had different plans, and because of the war, my flight was canceled. So I had to do this virtually, but I'll try to make it as engaging as possible. And I'll still ask questions, but I would assume that you guys are all answering as I'm asking the questions. So are we ready to start?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right. So first of all, how many of the students had actually heard the name TWA? I'm assuming that there are not that many hands going up. TWA, because this is what happens all the time when young architects come to join my office and I ask them that I used to work for TWA, they would look at me and say, what is TWA? So people of my generation kind of had heard of TWA. TWA was I kind of remember seeing some old Bollywood films. Hathi Mere Sathi, I remember one was that. There were a couple of others where TWA plane was landing at Santa Cruz Airport. And it was considered that the protagonists were basically flying in from abroad. And to give you a little bit of background, and so the reason why this is important is because TWA was one of the pioneers of the jet aviation industry. So after the Wright brothers started the flight, and then as the flying became popular, flying was basically airlines were mainly used to deliver mail during the World War I, and it did not have any passenger flights. In 1940s, people started developing idea that maybe there is a different mode of transportation that people can fly. And so that was the beginning of commercial airline. Today, we can't imagine the world without being able to fly from one place to the other. But in those days, it was only available to rich and famous because it was extremely expensive. And the industry grew very quickly because of the need of flying. People had to get from one place to the other, and they could not only be restricted to the land or sea travel. So TWA was one of the very first airlines that basically started their operations. And so this is the story of actually jet aviation in context with one of the iconic buildings that was ever designed, and what happened to the industry, what happened to the building, and how I personally got involved in this journey of this terminal. So that is what we were going to discuss today. So again, this is the reason why the topic is life of an airport passenger terminal and beyond. So can you guys see my slide moving? Can you see the next slide?
Yeah. We can.
Okay, perfect. So as I said, that in 1940s, the commercial airline started, and coast to coast, like from New York to LA, it would take about 48 hours to travel by air. And the flights would probably fly only up to 5,000 feet and 100 miles an hour. So we've come a long way from there. TWA started in about 1946 and very quickly became the popular airline. And what you see over here is the golden age. This is what people have always talked about in aviation, the heydays, the golden age of aviation. People used to dress up to go take a flight. The photograph on the left is basically that you were served a 4-course meal, whether you sat in the first class or the back class. People were always smiling and welcoming because it was a luxurious experience. TWA became a very popular airline because Howard Hughes, you may have seen this movie of Leonardo DiCaprio called Aviators, where he played Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes has been one of the biggest aviators in the world. Was an entrepreneur and an owner of TWA at one point. He basically had many friends in Hollywood and dignitaries. So TWA became one of the airlines that basically served all the dignitaries uh, and celebrities. And so it became very popular. So then how did basically JFK happen? So I wanted to give you a little bit of context of JFK. I don't know how many of you have ever flown to JFK, but JFK basically is one of the world gateways, and that was the entrance into the United States. Many of us, even including myself, when I landed here in 1991, I landed at JFK. So what you see is the picture on the left side. Can you see my cursor? I don't think, but let me see if I can.
Yeah.
So the picture on the left. So this is the original master plan of JFK, where you had short runways. They were spread in all directions because planes have to have a certain direction of air in order to be able to take off and land. And then it kind of developed into this urban cul-de-sac where the line came in from the road came from outside, and the terminals were spread around. And then that continued developing in the future from 1938 to 1945. Various versions of this urban cul-de-sac was formed. But then in 1955 is when this terminal master plan was basically set up, which is the main image on the side. This was basically, and I'm going to just go one more back. So this is the site of Terminal 5, which is the TWA site. When Aerosaarinen was hired, basically he looked at the site and felt that this was the deepest corner of the airport, and this is where he decided to put his terminal. He also decided that he wanted to create a vista. So this was the Van Wyck Expressway, which basically came into the airport. He drew a line across and basically put the terminal right on the access for the entrance. So as you came into the airport, you're able to see the terminal. And that basically was his concept. This is the terminal. This is the photograph from 1955 to 1975. This is the terminal. And this is the entrance of Van Wyck Expressway. So this is what I was talking earlier. In 1940, late 1940s, early 50s is when TWA started talking about developing a terminal of their own. And it was the President Ralph Damon who basically kind of started pushing with the encouragement from Howard Hughes to create an iconic terminal building at JFK, because they wanted to make a statement that this is the world gateway and we are creating an iconic structure. So there were two iconic structures that were developed in 1950s. One was TWA terminal and the second was Pan Am, which was another international jet aviation leader. So there were two iconic structures that were developed at JFK Airport. The inspiration, and they decided to hire Aerosaarinen, who was already making waves in organic architecture. And so there were a couple of projects that he had worked on, which was the St. Louis Arch, the Gateway Arch, which was a significant structure, and then his chapel at MIT and the Cresceg Auditorium. Some of the inspiration that basically were kind of raised for this building were St. Louis, Lambert St. Louis Terminal, and a couple of other buildings around the world, like Sydney Opera, Guggenheim Museum. And this was, again, kind of a very interesting era of architecture, where architecture kind of was turning, the modern architecture was turning into this huge kind of organic geometries that were basically kind of created by concrete, and that they were able to provide infinite shapes. And Frank Gehry came way later in talking about kind of organic shapes and forming, but this is what was basically going on. So this is the very first sketch that Aerosaarinen did when he visited the site. And this is what I was talking about, the entrance to the airport, where he decided that he wanted to put this building on an axis. He also wanted to basically create a bird in flight. He wanted to create this image of bird about to take a flight with their wings spread. And then inside, he wanted to try and create a kind of a more organic kind of a feel of moving from one place to the other without basically seeing a clear separation. These were some of the images of early interiors. Of course, it kind of got, it remained quite kind of close to the original thinking, but it finally changed between here to the final working drawings. As you see in this image, that it was basically always conceived as one large shell that covered all these different functions within the terminal. Original idea was it was supposed to be one contiguous shell, concrete shell, that was supported on four corners, that would then encompass the entire interior space of the terminal. From there, Saarinen kind of grew into making it a little more, and then it became 4 individual shells that were then connected by skylights. This is Eero Saarinen basically kind of studying the model, and this is my favorite photograph of the architect actually kind of looking into the model, making sure that he understood what it felt like. Today, you guys have it very easy because you can create a 3D walkthrough and actually, or a virtual reality or augmented reality, and be able to see what the space would look like before it is built. In the old days, they had to do it hard way and basically build a model. This is actually an information counter that you will see some pictures later on, but I just wanted to show you the example of the actual hand drawing. And again, when I started in architecture, we used to have drawing boards and we did everything by hand. Um, and and it was always difficult when you look at an organic architecture. I always thought that a lot of the building geometries were accidental. But when I actually saw the drawing in the early stage of my career, where I was the plant clerk at TWA, I realized that Saarinen actually not only conceived these, but actually created a very, very complex construction documents that actually any contractor can be able to build this thing. So what you see over here is that he is taking a very complex hyperbolic curve. He's then providing elevations and actually providing the radii at various junctions in order to be able to create a 3-dimensional space at the time when 3D modeling was not available. And so the only way to imagine this, to basically create number of sections from various points and be able to give a precise location and the radius of the curve. Today, the world has become very easy because of computer simulation. But in those days, this was very difficult. And actually, every single curve in this building have been calculated and been designed with ultimate precision. So the design was complete, and then it went into construction. Now, how do you construct such a huge concrete structure? The entire building was formed at once. What do you see over here? So first it was formed in plywood and then rebarred, and the entire shell, 4 shells, were all simultaneously reformed. And the people who actually worked in late 50s at TWA have told me that there was a continuous concrete pour. In order to be able to achieve this form, you could not stop pouring concrete. Of course, there were no major plants. There were concretes were basically delivered by trucks, and the trucks were aligned about 3 miles onto Van Wyck Expressway for 7 days for a non-stop pour. The trucks kept on pulling in front of the terminal, and they would pour and then they would leave. So the entire structure was poured in one form. And this is after the concrete was formed. And you can see that it was all basically in one single shot. What you see is that these are the 2 columns in front and then the 2 columns in the back. The only support in this building is actually through these 4 columns, and everything else is cantilevered. So again, a very bold move, not just geometrically and aesthetically, but also from civil engineering point of view. These are some of the images of as the terminal started coming together inside. Again, as you see, the concrete, and this is in 1962 when the terminal opened. This is what it looked like. Again, celebration of flight. This is the bird's peak that is about to basically take off. And again, you can see all the organic shapes. This was the interior. again, looking at creating a space after when you check in, which looked out on the tarmac where you can see the aircrafts pulling in and out. You can go from one side of the terminal to the other via jet bridge, and basically reach from a club to a restaurant. This is the information counter picture that I showed you earlier. This is what it looked like. And it was actually conceived on paper and then constructed. But what is genius over here is that this is not just a counter. This is also a main air supply duct that comes from the bottom and supplies the air to the lower lobby. What you see over here is that these organic shapes where he basically creates, where he creates a vertical element and then turns it into a horizontal element. So what is the canopy outside that then becomes the arch inside, which also is then the slab on the upper level. And this kind of accidents are constantly discovered in this building. Again, very poetic. This is the building where I worked for 7 years when I started my career. My office was in the basement, and I worked every day in this building. And I am not kidding you, every single day when I came into this building, I discovered something new. Every day I would find a shape or a view that I was not aware of. And every detail you can see is very well crafted and romantically executed. This is when it's all in operation. This was the restaurants and Paris Cafe and the club. Again, it was Saarinen did this very well, where basically he wanted to give that connection to flight. The passenger who come in should be able to see where they're going and be excited about the next part of their journey. This is what architects are trying to achieve today, the connection to the airside, connection to the aircraft. Passengers coming in, what you hear today is intuitive flow, that where you should be able to come in and be able to see where you're heading out. And this connection to flight is extremely important. This was established by Eero Saarinen in late 1950s, and it is still considered to be a kind of an avant-garde concept of airport of the future. This is the view to get to the flight satellite. So once you check in and then when you're ready to take board your flight, you go. And over here also, what he's doing is that he's not just providing a straight connector. He gives it a slight slope. So as you walk up, you know that you're going to some exciting place. You must have seen this image in the movie Catch Me If You Can, where Leonardo DiCaprio is basically going in final scene where he gets caught. But again, this is the journey that Saarinen basically created. And again, he was always so conscious of where you're coming from and where you're going. This is the image of after it went into operation. So there was satellite 1. And then there was a walkway where the second satellite was supposed to come in. What do you see over here? And I'm not going to go into technicalities too much over here today, because that would be a whole different lecture. But what you see is the jet bridges. When you get off the terminal, you get on a jet bridge to get into a plane. In 40s and 50s, the only way to get into an aircraft was actually get off the building, walk down, walk up the stairs to the aircraft. Saarinen came up with this idea of why cannot I connect the building to the aircraft? And so this was the second terminal. He also designed Washington Dulles terminal, where he actually kind of did the similar experiment and brought the idea of jet bridge, which is a moving walkway that connects to the aircraft. Again, today you cannot imagine an airport without a jet bridge, but these were very, very new ideas. And this is what it looked like. So you see the front end, and in those days there was first class and then there was a public class. So if you are a celebrity, you would come into the aircraft from the front. And if you are a commoner, you would come to the aircraft from the back. The reason why there is a certain geometry of this, because Saarinen designed the building for the aircraft 707, which was the popular aircraft at that time. So everything was the whole building and the satellite and the bridges and the connectors were all designed for 707, which was the design aircraft. And it was supposed to house about less than 1,000 people in the terminal. This is Constellation aircraft, which was again a very popular turboprop. This is one of the aircrafts that TWA served, and this is the 707. So what happened to the terminal and the jet aviation industry? As the flight and the aircraft use became popular, the aircraft manufacturers were making moves in leaps and bounds. There was a tremendous innovation in the turbine technology, and the jet engines basically were developed that were able to provide a longer flight, be able to create a larger fuselage, and be able to provide uh, a larger uh, uh, aircraft carrier that can hold more passengers. So what you see over here is that Constellation, which was one of the aircraft that TWA terminal served, held about 99 passengers. 707, that was basically designed, this building was designed for, held somewhere around 140 to 200 passengers. But very quickly, within 10 years of this building coming into action, uh, 747 were introduced, and that held about 400 passengers. What you see in the picture over here on the left is that 747 wingtip, the tail of that wing was actually higher than the height of the building. Saarinen never realized that the aviation industry would move this quickly. Unfortunately, Saarinen passed away before the building opened up, and he couldn't have seen such a quick, dynamic move in the jet aviation industry. So what happened in a capitalist society of United States, that everything became commoditized. Airline before 1978 was a regulated industry. What is regulation? Regulated industry. It means that you can only fly certain routes, you can only sell certain number of tickets, you can only charge certain amount for the tickets. And so it was a controlled environment. As the capitalistic concept grew, airline industry was deregulated in 1978. And that means that anybody with money could start an airline. And because it was such a popular mode of transportation, airline industry was basically brought into the picture. And what you see over here is that the graph on the left side is that the passengers count basically increased tremendously, and the cost of ticket went down. So more and more people started flying as it started becoming affordable. And then it became a mode of transportation. The greed kind of came in and said, how can we pack more people in the plane? So people were basically packed in a plane like sardines, and everything became about economics. How can we make more money by trying to put more people on the plane? So what you talk about today is the space between your knee and the seat in front of you, which is basically kind of every inch that is shaved, that basically can allow you to put an extra row. And this is what the airline started doing. They started packing. But what happened that, yes, you basically added those passengers on the aircraft, but then they had to come somewhere. So here's the TWA terminal in late 70s and early 80s. where there were supposed to be about 1,000 people in the terminal at any given time, or rather in a day. About 20 to 30,000 people started flying out of this. People were all over the sidewalks and the building. And this is actually this is the picture that I took in 91 when I first went into this terminal. I landed at JFK, I saw this building, and I was so much in love with this building. And then finally I walked into the building, and this is what I saw. This is actually the everyday event. People lining up to try and check in. There was not enough space, and everybody was just frustrated. You see this lobby over here, the lower lobby on top in 1960s. How romantic this whole notion of this organic architecture where spaces fly from one space into the other. Of course, in 1990, the security became kind of critical, and so they started putting the security at the front of the terminal. And right off the bat, the romanticism of this lobby was gone. You see this ugly ramp that was basically created because people had carry-on luggages. And they basically did not want to kind of lug the luggages over the steps. So some brilliant guy who thought that knew what he was doing and wanted to play architect created this ugly ramp. And that basically did not fit with Sarinen's design of actually kind of having an organic architecture. It was completely out of place and an eyesore. This is basically that romantic last area before you go on the flight. You couldn't see where you were going. The golf carts were basically going back and forth. People were like confused. They were waiting. This is the baggage claim area where people are waiting for their loved ones to get off and could not see. And this is what basically they were dealt with. What you see on top again is this romantic notion of settling down before the flight. Again, TWA was running out of counter space. So some genius came in and said, well, we're going to create more counters. Who cares? We don't need the seating area. And they basically put these counters, put an ugly conveyor outside, demolished the entire fishbowl inside over here, and put counters. And this is how this terminal existed when I came in 1991. It was in operation like this for almost 15 years. My last project at TWA when I left was that I was so driven to basically open up the fishbowl. I actually removed these counters and then opened up this fishbowl before I departed in 1999. This was again kind of TWA was growing, so they connected. They bought another terminal on the east side, which was Terminal 6, which was also an iconic building designed by IMPay. And then they put ugly conveyor that basically connected the two terminals. So again, all the vistas that Saarinen thought that were required were gone. This is what happened in ad hoc. This was the satellite that was designed by Saarinen. There was a concept that there would be another satellite like that, but by this time, the terminal had grown and 747s had to be accommodated. So Kevin Roche, who inherited Saarinen's practice, designed a larger flight satellite without giving any consideration to what it will do in the actual building. This is what happened. I left TWA in 1999. This actually terminal, the last flight that left from TWA out of this building on April 10th in 2001. I was present when that last flight left. And it was very emotional for everybody who had been associated with this building for more than 50 years. could not believe that a golden era was ending, and this basically terminal was shut down in 2001. And then after it was shut down, nobody was actually the custodian. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, who owned the building at that time, did not have the money to take care of the building, so it went into disrepair. The gutter that was basically designed did not clogged up. Um, the plaster and wire mesh that actually formed all these organic geometries was falling. There was an asbestos on the roof that basically was started falling apart. And then the projects were just abandoned. And this is, unfortunately, this is what this building looked like for the most of 2000. Very unfortunate. The curtain wall, the rubber gaskets that were basically designed in 1950s were not able to really hold the curtain wall. So the glass panels used to just pop out and fall onto the ground, and were not able to replace them because every single panel is a custom designed panel, and it was extremely expensive to try and replace them. So you would see this in 2000. If you basically drove around JFK, you would see half removed film. You would see most of the panels were plywooded, and it looked like a distressed property. The skylight on top was broken. It was leaking all over inside the terminal, and it was just the penny tiles, the tiles that were basically specially ordered for this terminal, was no longer being manufactured. So there was no way to repair the flooring or the walls that basically had these penny tiles. And it just kind of kept on deteriorating. I saw a lot of this deterioration during my period at TWA. TWA was not financially stable company and was not able to do this restoration. The landmark designation and historical preservation committees basically got involved and tried to save this building and designated this building as a historic landmark, unfortunately with no money. So you basically had a lot of restrictions, but no resources to be able to really bring up this terminal back again into life. Um, just to give you the idea and connecting from where basically we started in 1955 of the master plan to what happened. And so this is where the TWA resided. This is Terminal 6, this is Terminal 5. And then obviously there was a growth that was required, and people wanted to basically demolish this building, but could not demolish the building, thankfully, because it was landmarked. But then they said, well, we'll work around this building. So they came up with a master plan of basically putting a new building behind the TWA terminal in order to try and optimize the airfield. This was one of the options that was looked at. This was another option that was looked at. But as you see, all options were basically kind of to build past the TWA terminal because they could not touch the terminal. Again, and this is what happened in 2008 when JetBlue started their operation. JetBlue basically came in and built the terminal behind it. And there were some restrictions put, thankfully. But again, what happened was that the vistas that were created by Saarinen that basically kind of gave you the view of the airfield, the view from the access point, they were all gone because on one side there was a rail system that came in, there was a garage that was put in, and then there was a terminal. So this terminal went into a well, and basically you could not actually experience it. This is when I joined Port Authority of New York and New Jersey as the chief of planning, and again I had a tremendous affinity towards this building. So I went to my bosses and said, well, we can't leave this iconic building unattended. We need to figure out something. So I launched, with the support of my bosses, a adaptive reuse study. And one of the main instructions that I was given was that whatever you find, you need to basically find an option for this building that will be self-sufficient, financially self-sufficient, because it's a white elephant. It requires a tremendous amount of management, and we are not going to spend money. So we launched this, and we try to study other transportation buildings around the world where the adapted reuse was done. So, Santa Monica Airport was basically kind of turned into a museum. The hangar building in Santa Monica was basically kind of converted. Musée d'Orsay, which is now today a very famous museum in Paris, was a train station. It was converted into an art gallery. Atocha train station in Madrid was created in an eco palm garden. So we looked at all of this, and we first came up with some idea of that. How do we preserve the open space and try to create some sort of an open space? And then one of the ideas that we came up with was that we maintain some of these vistas, but then also try to develop a hotel. And hotel was something that became the brilliant idea, because hotel would then provide sufficient usage for the terminal building that was more of a public space. So what we decided was that we built two towers, the hotel rooms in the back, keeping the main vista open, and then the rest of the connection to the towers of the hotel room would be connected from the main lobby. So again, this is our some of these early sketches that we had developed. And then basically, it went to the board of Port Authority. We basically launched the public tender to try and basically find somebody. And so it took from 2010 up until 2018 to really find a partner who actually would be willing to take the risk and develop. And then Port Authority started a very arduous restoration project in partnership with MCR Hotel Hospitality Group that actually took on the restoration effort. And you see the fishbowl that I had talked about earlier. We reopened it with its original state in 2014. We restored some of the public areas, and we brought back the glory of TWA terminal. We rebuilt one connector entirely, and then these were basically, and this is the hotel, the tower. As you see that there were some restrictions, the hotel tower could not go higher than the height of the shell, and it provided a backdrop to the terminal. So to provide a how do you salvage a terminal that was in that well, and then created this outdoor space with a constellation. And this is something that is amazing, and I cannot give more credit to Tyler Morse, who is the CEO of MCR Hotel. And one other person that in my life I've seen was as committed and as excited about this terminal, and took a tremendous amount of care and effort to reactivate this terminal. And if you are ever at JFK, you must visit this terminal. And then MCR did something even interesting. So this is the view from the hotel, one of the hotel rooms, where you can see this iconic shell. They also created an infinity pool on the top, where basically you can go to the terrace and actually enjoy the flight. So again, what Sarinan wanted to do basically was then implemented over here with a a celebration of light. The Constellation airline that what you saw in a couple of slides back, which is in the back, that actually is a bar. What you see over here, this is the aircraft, and they created a bar. So you can actually go onto the tarmac, go walk up to the aircraft and go and have a drink. This is actually my team, merchant aviation team, that we basically had one of our annual meetings last year, and I basically gave them all a walkthrough. These were some of the uses that actually kind of developed. So this became a performance space. The main space that was basically kind of left untouched became a performance space. This was a Louis Vuitton, a fashion show that they basically kind of tried to, from Atocha train station, they kind of tried to create an eco garden, and actually models were basically walking up and down these ramps. And so again, this became kind of a celebration of this space that was basically once defined as this great iconic building and celebration of travel. And so this was the logo of TWA when it was growing up, called Up and Away. This was a famous commercial. And so here we are again in 21st century, that we are back to celebrating this terminal, and we hope that this will remain and people from all over the world can continue to keep looking at this terminal and marvel what this great iconic building did at one point, and now what it is going to do now. And again, I want to acknowledge the images that you saw. Ezra Stoller was one of the architectural photographers who basically was in love with the building. All the black and white images that you saw was done by her. Of course, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, where I worked, and of course the MCR hotels, which basically kind of took a painstaking effort to try and develop this terminal. So again, thank you very much. This is a picture of, again, my team, where we basically spend, and I actually walked all my young architects that where my career began in 1991, and here we are. So, you know, dream big. Don't think that one person cannot make change, and always question what is going on, because unless you ask questions, nobody is going to find an answer. So again, thank you so much. And Mamta, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Kiran, for that presentation. I would now like to call Shantanu Puredi, the Dean of Academics, to further the discussion.
Hi, Kiran. This is a fantastic presentation. And in the early days, and my interest in airports, I was an architect. After I finished from the A in London, I worked at Terry Farrell and Partners. And at that point, of course, we were not doing any airport, but he's done many airports, and there was a lot of interest. And I did work on train stations, but nothing like an airport. The fascination of working on an airport is completely different. And that office did large airports, so there was a fascination there. And so my questions so my introduction to these airports was mainly about, you know, the airports that started becoming like gateways to cities, and and also becoming, now when they see these airports are as large as small cities, you know, the airports are becoming cities. But the Saranand Airport, I mean, of course, I've been to JFK, but I've not been to this terminal, so, you know, missed opportunity maybe. But I'm saying the airports were looked at as architectural sort of gems at that time, because it wasn't as complex, but it was about an imagination of flying. I mean, I think that is where architects were trying to bring in. So the whole, nobody imagined, like you said, nobody imagined that from a building it would become a city. You know, the transformation, the aviation industry, but also the nature of growth itself around the airport. Like, for example, you are able to now construct a scenario of a hotel because it's easy. It's you know, it doesn't have to go outside the airport. It is a part of the airport. These new imaginations that have occurred have given the airport a new dimension. So I'm just wondering, and a scenario of what are these other scenarios that people talk about? I'm sure people talk casinos, they talk entertainment, they talk, you know, it's like you're flying through, and I mean, you know more about airports. So what are these imaginations? Because you can go to town with these imaginations. I just want some ideas on this so that our students know what airports have become now.
Sure, sure. So basically, so again, kind of as I mentioned that, I'm by education, I'm an architect and an urban designer.
Yeah.
One of the things that really fascinated me about airports was, as you said, Shantanu, that these are small cities, and it's basically kind of being designed and used as small cities, and that was what really kind of intrigued me about airport design. That it is not just about terminals, but it's also about these other uses and in other uses, you talk about the non-aeronautical uses. I'm talking about aeronautical uses also. There are offices, there are cargo buildings, there are hangars, there are fueling stations, and so there are tremendous amount of other functions that support the airport is also on the airport. But what is growing day by day, and I'm sure that you all have seen the pictures of Jewel at Changi Airport, right? That's an eco garden. That is basically a garden that was created. And if you see the profile of passengers who come over there, many of them, it is not just for the passengers of the people who are traveling to Changi Airport, to and from Changi Airport, but also the communities from within the city are also coming to the airport for an experience. I remember when I was a child, just to be able to go to Santa Cruz, that domestic airport, where you could basically go to the Juhu Road and actually stand at the end of a runway and be able to see flights take on and off. So it is always a kind of a celebration of flight, and this is something that is missing. So people would love. So there are a lot of things that are happening. Hotels are again to support the travelers, but there are malls being created at the airport, big major shopping malls. There are multimodal transportation hubs. So basically, you have air, land, and rail travel kind of connecting, and that kind of becomes a transportation development kind of a hub that basically is growing everywhere in the world now. And some of these other non-aeronautical functions, like Munich Airport, have created a plaza. And if you could go to Munich's website and look at the pictures, in the winter, it's a ice skating rink. In the summer, it becomes a performance space. There are rock bands held. There are farmers market held over there. So again, it's a transformative space that is basically created. And I think that, I mean, in Mumbai, and Bangalore, they've started looking at some of these things because, again, since the travel in the East is a little bit different than what happens in the West, where in the East, like if, for example, if you are a well-wisher dropping off your loved one at a Mumbai airport, you're not even allowed inside the terminal. You're left outside. So now there becomes a need for an outside space that actually is basically the final goodbyes or greeting space. And then how do you grow that space into kind of a more cohesive, not just the travel space, but so again, there are a lot of innovations being done, a lot of things are being done that is basically beyond the four walls of the terminal.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, and I think I'll leave it to students after this one comment. I remember the experience of traveling and as an airport. People have even talked about the other modes of transport that come into the airport, and airports are trying to give you the experience of travel, from that mode. That means you're actually entering an airport. You can drop off your bags way before you actually reach the airport. So that experience of getting, when you're in an airport, you want to be free of your bags. You want to be a person who explores the airport. And I think airports are now extending their tentacles, as much as they're already very complex facilities but they've extended their tentacles in a way that all the other transport networks have also sort of understood that airport experience needs to be created well before you're reaching the airport. So I think that's an interesting concept where you want to be bags free. You want to be, I'm a traveler now, I'm free of my bags. The anxiety of, checking in, you check in much earlier than you actually reaching an airport. Like, for example, we all know now checking in, we check in early, but sometimes it's the physical bag, etc. The experience of travel, and an airport is being created well in advance. I think these are innovations because of technology and a lot of these things, which has, I mean, in our lifetime, we've seen that, and hopefully all that is, only going to improve and change. But I'll leave this to the students who will have a lot of questions. I love the space you're in, Kiran. It'll all us old architects. That's a fantastic space you're in. Lovely.
So where I am, and again, basically, this is something that it's a Frank Lloyd Wright home that I'm very proudly own. One of the 3 Frank Lloyd Wright homes that were built in New Jersey, and I'm sure that Mamta is organizing a presentation of this very soon. So next year you will hear something about this building as well.
Excellent.
We're most definitely looking forward to that. Avni?
Yeah. Thank you, Shantanu. I would like to call Manoj Parmar now, the director of the college. Go for it.
Hi, Kiran.
Hi, Manoj.
Hey, after a long time.
That's right.
So I just intervened before you start question answer session. Me and Kiran, knew each other during our school days, and we've followed similar trajectories, and we did architecture just back and forth separated by 1 year. And I just came to US, and then he followed, and then he stayed back, and I came back. I remember Kiran and myself, though studying in, I was senior to him by 1 year, but we used to have constant discussion, on architecture all the time. I feel that that has helped a lot. I think, this is something I relish. That every single project that he would come over and discuss, and I would show work that I would do, and he just other day he just talked about one of the project, I think, and from somewhere that I did in my second year, maybe, I don't know what was it, and he remembers it well. So this is something, I guess, peer learning, I call it, because this is like going back and forth all the time. And it's really a pleasure to have you on board at KRVIA, because I knew that you were working there, and I think one of our common friend mentioned about you working on TWA. So besides all this thing, let me just tell you all that Kiran is a fine Gujarati stage artist. He has worked on several Gujarati stage across. I mean, and I think he would drag us to Prithvi Theatre at that time, and I don't know, he would introduce us to, I think he'd introduce us to Paresh Rawal and many more, I guess. At that point of time, I'm talking about 80s. So I think he still continues, I believe, in New Jersey.
Yes.
So Kiran, this has been a great presentation, and I have seen a TWA terminus 88 and 91 both, while coming and taking exit. And of course, this last time I visited, I could not see the terminus. But definitely this time, if I come, definitely I would like to meet you and then look at the terminal once again. Thanks, Kiran. I think it was a great pleasure meeting you after many years, and I think hope that we continue conversation, revive those conversations.
Absolutely. And as again Manoj said that, I mean, this is one of the things that basically both Manoj and I went to LS Raheja School of Architecture, and I think that we learned from each other a lot more than what we learned in the school. And this is one of the things that what I always feel, that the architecture is one field where basically collaboration makes you a better architect, a better designer, and being able to kind of be open to ideas and learn from each other. I'm still learning. I still don't know a lot, and some of my colleagues are actually online because they wanted to come and hear me today. And I always tell them that, remain inquisitive, always ask questions to your colleagues, to your fellow students, because you will always be surprised what you will learn that you probably did not know. So again, Manoj, thank you. for everything, and I hope that you get an opportunity to come and see this building. And again, this would be for everybody on the call, and if you're interested in architecture and if you're interested in aviation, this is definitely one place that you should visit. It's been restored impeccably, and it is definitely something that is worth looking at as the student of architecture. So please come to New York to see this thing.
Thanks, Kiran, once again. And I would like to discuss many things with you personally, but we can't do it here. We'll catch up some other time. A lot more things, but I think Mamta, just go ahead with your question answer session.
Yeah, Vikram, thanks for the comment. So Vikram's mentioned fabulous work, overwhelmed to realize the tenacity new to see this through. Vikram, it would be really nice if you come on board and initiate a discussion. Are you there, Vikram?
Yeah, thanks, Mamta. I'm sorry, not in the completely the right frame to have the discussion, but it was fabulous to see this work. And I mean, I'm just repeating what I wrote over there. So it was particularly after going through 99 to 2018, the amount of I could kind of understand or relate. I mean, I'm a conservation architect myself, but I'm much younger, so I could kind of feel, not actually understand, not actually go through the same motions, but could understand what you must have gone through to see this through. So I don't have a question per se, but if you would like to tell us a little more about the pain or the kind of travels, you may say, of seeing this through. I mean, some anecdotes or some things.
Sure. So first of all, I mean, I would say that, it was not just me. There were a lot of people who basically kind of believed in this, and as I said, Tyler Morse from MCR Hospitality Group was one of the champions. That I think that this would not really would have happened if he personally did not come on board and actually took on this mammoth task. So definitely there were a lot of people from Port Authority who believed in it, and a lot of architects from all over the world kind of felt that this had to be done. So it was not just me. I would basically say that when I was, I would say probably young and naive when I started with TWA. So one of how I started with this, I did not say this before. But when I finished my studies at Pratt in urban design, I was supposed to kind of come back. Like Manoj, I was going to fly back to India to start my own practice. I saw an ad for a summer internship that was TWA was looking for to find a plan clerk. And what does plan clerk do? They basically catalog drawings. So you basically have like a bunch of drawings that you kind of catalog. And so they said that they wanted somebody to catalog original drawings prepared by Aerosainen. And there were like close to about 3,000 drawings on this building. And for me, this was a dream job as an architect, that to be able to see the piece of history and work of art firsthand. So I went for the job interview and they looked at my resume and said, well, you're overqualified. You have master's degree. You basically had a little bit of your own practice. We were looking for first year architecture student to do this job. And I said, look, if you will allow me to look at these drawings, I'll work for you for free. And that's how I actually got into TWA. And for 1 month, I basically was in heaven, actually looking at these drawings and marveling how the hell did they actually conceive this building. Soon I basically realized that I was one of the few people who really cared for the building, and most of the people, not because of any ill intentions, but because the terminal did not work for its purpose. It was extremely inconvenient place. It was inefficient, and it was extremely difficult to maintain. So people were making bad decisions left, right, and center. I remember in my very third month at TWA, I was sitting in a very senior level meeting where basically they were meeting to discuss the demolition of that the information counter that I showed in the earlier part of the presentation. I heard this thing and I just basically jumped off the chair and I said, you cannot absolutely not do something like that. Do you realize that there are about 28 drawings for this one particular structure? It is a piece of art. It's not a sculpture. It has its meaning. And I had to put up the fight. I almost got fired 3 times during my early days at TWA because I was very vocal and standing my ground about basically trying to make people understand the value of a historical value of this beautiful building and and what it was designed to do. So yes, in the early days, it was extremely difficult struggle to convince people that the solutions that they are coming up with may not be the right solution. And I think that this is where I probably played the most important part, where basically I was one man standing in between the people who hated the building and wanted to basically bulldoze half the structure, and I was standing in between to basically prevent it from happening. Um, of course, after that, basically to see it through, as I said, that it was a lot of convincing to people with money, people with power, people with political contacts, and be able to let people know that this was important. But then, as I said, that once the ball started rolling, it was easy because more people with resources and the goodwill kind of came into the play, and then it just took its own life. So again, it's a long-winded answer, but again, I think that what I would say is that I believed in what I was saying. I fought my battle. I would have. There was certainly a risk of me getting completely eliminated in this process, and this would have still happened. But luckily for me and for this building, that did not happen. So again, have courage to question people.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vikram. If there are any questions from the students or faculty, you can put them in the chat.
I think they're all mesmerized by it, Avneesh. I don't see any questions. But yes, that was wonderful. I mean, I don't have the right kind of words to express, but these are some of the structures that we idolize and architects who we idolize during our student times, and we try to push it to our students now. And you really marvel at the way that without the kind of tools we have today, that architects were able to visualize and envision it and actually create it. So, and it has been fantastic for you to bring it to us in this manner. And I don't think I would even remember if I've been to the terminal in '86 when I went to the US. So, yeah, it's wonderful that you brought it to us. And we look forward to seeing you in the physical space. If you can join in next time when we open our encounters next term with one of your buildings, so with Geneve. So that will be wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, Kiran. Thank you, Shantanu. And thanks, Manoj, for introducing us to Kiran. It's nice to see your friendship still going strong that way. This is the last encounters for the term. And thank you, students, for being there. Thanks, Avni.
Thanks, Kiran.
Thank you. I would just basically kind of end with one note that that what Shantanu brought up, and again, I mean, that was one of the things that when Manoj and I were talking, we were talking about some other aspects of aviation industry. And what Shantanu brought up is basically something that is what I do today in my career is basically airport of the future, where what we call an end-to-end passenger journey. And what is end-to-end passenger journey is that airport terminal is just a portal that basically comes in the middle of your journey. Your journey starts at your hotel room or your apartment or your office and ends at your hotel or your apartment or your home or your office. And what really is this journey? And what we are all trying to explore is that it's the experience from end to end that is critical. And if we can basically try to kind of mitigate that, because what you see in Aerosarinen's building, that basically what I was saying was that is basically being looked at even today, which is as soon as you get off the curb, you should be able to, in the shortest walking distance, you should be able to check your bag in. This is something that Sarinen did this very well. You could basically get off the curb and actually walk just 10 feet and you are at the ticket counter, which is a phenomenal service. Being able to kind of get from the check-in into this space, what we call great space, which is the gathering space, which is where you see today concessions, is basically the space that he conceived as a gathering space, and then the final journey. I think that one of the things that basically, and someday we will probably talk about my other work, but the airport of the future is very focused on actually creating that end-to-end experience, and some tremendous efforts have been being made. And I think that next 10 years are going to be very exciting, as you probably are now hearing about, which is not in action, but probably in next couple of years it will come, is the urban air mobility. That because the highways and roadways are getting congested by hour, in every metropolitan city around the world, how do you get the passengers from the airport into an urban center? And so these autonomous drone flights that are being piloted as we speak, that basically you could actually kind of book on your cell phone an Uber flight or some sort of a taxi, urban taxi, and then basically get on this drone and be able to get to an urban center in less than 10 minutes. So again, it's all about improving the overall experience. And this is something that is a tremendous opportunity for people to explore. And again, it's not just that you have to be designing airport, but if you get into the mix of the entire journey, I'm sure that you would basically find some very interesting challenges to explore. So thank you again. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all in person, hopefully in near future.
Thanks, Kiran.
Thanks, Kiran. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.